This morning's gospel reading comes from Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Here, Jesus is tempted by the devil. When Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, having fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, Jesus was hungry. And the tempter came and said to Jesus, "If you are the child of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, 'One shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God.'" Then the devil took Jesus to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said, "If you are the child of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, 'God will give the angels charge of you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone.'" Jesus said to the devil, "Again it is written, 'You shall not tempt the sovereign your God.'" Again the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain, showed him all the nations of the world and the glory of them. And the devil said to Jesus, "All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to the devil, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, 'You shall worship the sovereign your God, and God only shall you serve.'" Then the devil left Jesus, and angels came and ministered to him. May God add understanding to this reading of the gospel.
Please be seated. Don't you wish you could sometimes just simply utter the words, "Be gone, Satan," and it's all gone and done, and you don't have to worry about it anymore? No, that's not reality. I hate to bring it to you. God, I ask that you anoint my heart and anoint my lips. I ask especially today that you remove me from myself, from all fears, concerns, and anxieties, and replace that with the movement of your Holy Spirit. Anoint those who would hear this message, that they would hear what you have for them on their faith journey this day. Amen. I would entitle today's sermon to go along with what we're going to be doing on Wednesday nights and what we did this past Wednesday, in that we tried to take the Stations of the Cross, a very traditional, formal time of meditation and prayer, and bring it into today's life and how it impacts us and how we can walk that same journey. So I would entitle this, "One Struggle, One Fight." If that sounds familiar to some of you, it was on this past week. Today's gospel lesson from Matthew is the telling of the temptation of Christ. The person presenting these temptations is the devil. "If you are the child of God, command these stones become loaves of bread." And Jesus ignored the temptation. "If you are the child of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, 'God will give the angels charge of you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone.'" Finally, Jesus is tempted to fall down and worship Satan, and all the things of the earth shall be given unto him. And then Jesus said to the devil, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, 'You shall worship the sovereign your God, and God only shall you serve.'" In all of these temptations for Jesus, please note that it was prefaced with, "If you are the child of God." Jesus knew who he was without a doubt. Jesus knew that he would be fed. Jesus knew that he would always have greater things than what Satan was offering. And Jesus knew what temptation really was. The most important thing that Jesus knew was how to handle that temptation. We also know this secret. We often just forget about or send it to the back of our minds because it's the easier path. And many of you watched the miniseries this week called When We Rise. Wow. I guess only Roy and I didn't have a laugh this week. During this series, we were reintroduced to a young man by the name of Cleve Jones. Cleve became an LGBT activist at the age of 17, moving from Arizona to San Francisco in 1972, following the year of love and wonderful and the flower child and power. He thought he would arrive in San Francisco and be greeted with open arms as a great savior for the people of the movement. Cleve was much like us, each one of us. He knew that he had a calling, and he was extremely passionate about that calling. When Cleve was tempted to follow a smoother path, like when his family invited him to come back home, he said no. Cleve responded with a resounding no after hearing the conditions that would come from his father. Come home and we will give you safety, we will give you shelter, and we will give you food and comfort, if you will let me heal you. Come home if you will let me do electric shock therapy on you. Come home. And Cleve said no. Cleve knew even at that young age that he had to stand for who and what he was. This is exactly the same journey that Jesus was on during this time of temptation with Satan. Cleve faced many difficulties, and these difficulties were not that long ago. I think almost everyone in this room is old enough to understand what was happening during the life of this activist. He was part of a movement for women's rights. He was part of a movement for health care for all people. He was part of a movement for the AIDS epidemic. He created the Names Project. He was part of a movement that helped get marriage equality passed just in 2015. So we're not talking about somebody who did something 2,000 years ago. We're talking about someone who faced temptation just as recently as 2 years ago. Just like we faced temptation on March 5th, 2017. We know who we are and what we are. We may not know what we are called to be or to do at a particular moment, and none of that matters. We know that we are a gift and a child of God. We know that we can protect ourselves from temptation by accepting who we are. Our biggest temptation, as it was for Jesus, as it was for Cleve, is very simple. The greatest temptation we have is to give up on ourselves because we are just tired of trying to be better or tired of trying to do more. The worst temptation that we face is to turn our back on the strength and the glory and the grace of God. The God that created us to be who and what we are and to walk with others along their journey. We can face any temptation that comes our way if we are willing to accept the great value of the human life that each one of us has been given. Once we accept that gift of our own value, we can begin to see that same gift and the value of each person that we come into contact with. Even in the ministries and the true fight for LGBT rights, we have learned that even if we do not fundamentally agree with one another, as long as we accept the value of their creation, then we can accomplish things far greater than we can alone. One of the most wonderful reflections of Cleve Jones in his philosophy of one struggle, one fight. Deal with things one at a time. We are not called to be all things to all people all of the time. Cleve learned early on that if he wanted to make an impact, he had to reach mainstream democracy. The suits in Washington, the people who held the purse strings to get AIDS funding. Cleve also knew that there was a group that just very simply their gift from God was to be a pain in the ass to all of society. And that group was called ACT UP. That group would sit instead of march. They would lay down on the streets in front of the Capitol in Washington and draw their bodies into the streets and say, "Another has died." It became a point where the people in the elite society no longer wanted to deal with them. At that moment, Cleve seized that moment and that power of that movement and went to ACT UP and said, "Now you've tried it your way. Join me and let's go this way and see what happens." Within a month, President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton walked the mall and saw the panels for the AIDS quilt. Within just a few months, there was funding for AIDS drugs. Sometimes the bad will help you get to the good. If you don't fall to the temptation of, "I've got to do it all myself." We are called to face the trials, tribulations, and temptations of this life, one battle at a time. No one expects us to do more than what we can do. God does not even expect that of us. Why should we expect that of ourselves? On this first Sunday of Lent, I ask you to walk this journey with yourself first, and then with God, your Creator and your Redeemer. Sometimes until you know what it is like to be judged, or to judge, to fall under the weight of a cross, to bear witness to the suffering of your loved ones. Until you can face that, it's sometimes hard to accept the reality and the truth of a resurrected Christ, because he went through a true cross. Never give up on yourself and fall into temptation of comfort, shelter, and joy. For the things that this earth have to offer are not permanent things. Accept the strength that God has for you, and all things will be possible. No one can tempt you to the point of turning your back on yourself or on God, as long as you know exactly who you are and from where you came. At the very end of that miniseries this past week, an African-American man who had served in Vietnam for 3 tours was kicked out, basically, sent to San Francisco by the Navy to hide him. One of my favorite quotes was, "Satan didn't create the evil of San Francisco and the gay movement. Our Navy did. They sent them there to hide them." He had a great lover, someone he was passionate about, that he lost on the ship that he was on in the Navy. Later in life, he had another lover who was trying to give him an ice bath to reduce the temperature from the AIDS epidemic, died in his arms. When the family found out that this person had passed away, they went to the home, put an eviction notice up, and started taking his things. He lost his lover, his home, his job, his hope. And he turned to drugs. Then he decided he wanted more, so he went to a church. It was an odd little church of little gray-haired white women who once a week, to try to make finances work, would allow the black queer church to meet there. Immediately after the departure of that church, the little gray-haired white ladies wiped down each pew with blessed holy water to cleanse them from the black queers. He continued his struggle. Finally, he went to that little black church, Refuge, a church for all people. He was baptized again. He found what he thought was his relationship with Christ. Towards the end of the miniseries, he was walking out of City Hall after meeting with a city commissioner, and he saw a person wearing a collar walking up the grand staircase of this Capitol building to do a wedding of a man and a woman. And he kind of smiled and just kind of brushed it off and walked on. Then he became ordained. The week after he was ordained, the Supreme Court of the United States passed that marriage was legal. And the next scene, he was doing a wedding between two women who were also social activists. He knew he was a child of God. He strayed. He was tempted. But he knew that the comfort, security, and solace that this world had to offer was far less than what Jesus Christ had to offer. So as Jesus was tempted, and all those temptations were prefaced with, if you are the child of God, then do this. I say to you today, if you are the child of God, you do not have to answer to anyone else's requests, temptations, or intimidations. You just accept the fact that you are the child of God. And as God said when Jesus was baptized, this is my child with whom I am pleased. And God said for a second time on the Mount of Transfiguration, you are my child, with you I am pleased. Do not give in to temptation, but accept the gift of grace, glory, and honor through God, your parent. Amen.